Okay, well, welcome everyone. Warmest greetings to the United Lodge of Theosophists, San Diego. This is the Aquarian series where each Saturday at this time, there is a hybrid meeting, Zoom-based, as you must all know, and also in person, presenting lectures and themes and discussion on the weekly themes that are given in the 2026 Aquarian Almanac. Which is available through this lodge if you go to their website. It's downloadable, I believe, as a PDF and also can be ordered as a hard copy. This week's theme, as you can see here, is the archetypal aspects of Venus, and in which we find this one sentence quote from Hermes: Venus casts its soft effect upon the world, transmitting the indigo ray of higher monastic intelligence, which is sharp and pure and penetrating. We now know that this quote is taken from the writings of Helen Valborg, who was a friend, an associate of the United Lodge of Theosophists in Santa Barbara, a remarkable seeker and teacher of Theosophia, who passed away May 9th, 2024. Helen wrote over 150 symbol articles for Hermes magazine from 1975 to 1989, where she utilized a method prescribed by H.P. Blavatsky, combining a remarkable global knowledge of myth and legend with the best findings of her day in regards to modern science, and illustrated how they often point to deeper occult sciences as represented in The Secret Doctrine. Her articles on esoteric astrology were collected together by Theosophy Trust and can be found online at theosophytrust.org. And they are also available in a printed book via Amazon. The same title, I think it's Esoteric Astrology.
Theosophical astrology.
Thank you. Theosophical astrology. Our presenter today is also from the Santa Barbara ULT, Maurice Bichef. So as a preface to the talk by Maurice, we have a short reading from Henry David Thoreau. Morning brings back the heroic ages. I was as much affected by the faint hum of a mosquito making its invisible and unimaginable tour through my apartment at earliest dawn, when I was sitting with door and windows open, as I could be by any trumpet that ever sang of fame. It was Homer's Requiem, itself an Iliad and Odyssey in the air, singing its own wrath and wanderings. There was something cosmical about it, a standing advertisement, till forbidden, of the everlasting vigor and fertility of the world. The morning, which is the most memorable season of the day, is the awakening hour. Then there is least somnolence in us, and for an hour at least, some part of us awakes, which slumbers all the rest of the day and night. Little is to be expected of that day, if it can be called a day, to which we are not awakened by our genius, are not awakened by our own newly acquired force and aspirations from within, accompanied by the undulations of celestial music instead of factory bells and a fragrance filling the air, to a higher life than we fell asleep from. And thus the darkness bears its fruit and proves itself to be good, no less than the light. That man who does not believe that each day contains an earlier, more sacred and auroral hour than he has yet profaned, has despaired of life and is pursuing a descending and darkening way. After a partial cessation of his sensuous life, the soul of man, or its organs rather, are reinvigorated each day, and his genius tries again what noble life it can make. All memorable events, I should say, transpire in morning time and in a morning atmosphere. The Vedas say all intelligences awake with the morning. Poetry and art and the fairest and most memorable of the actions of men date from such an hour. All poets and heroes, like Memnon, are the children of Aurora and emit their music at sunrise. To him whose elastic and vigorous thought keeps pace with the sun, the day is a perpetual morning. It matters not what the clocks say or the attitudes and labors of men. Morning is when I am awake and there is a dawn in me. Moral reform is the effort to throw off sleep. Why is it that men give so poor an account of their day if they have not been slumbering? They are not such poor calculators. If they had not been overcome with drowsiness, they would have performed something. The millions are awake enough for physical labor, but only 1 in a million is awake enough for effective intellectual exertion, only 1 in 100 millions to a poetic or divine life. To be awake is to be alive. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face? We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor. It is something to be able to paint a particular picture or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which morally we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts. So I now give you Maurice Bichef.
Thank you, Kirk. Thank you, everyone, for coming this afternoon. And I'm simply going to be, I'm not an expert on this subject or on astronomy or things like that, but I'm going to be trying to simply provide kind of an impressionist painting, plural paintings, of different ways in which the archetypes of Venus have been portrayed, and hopefully leave time for questions and comments, because so many of you have so much information yourself and perspective maybe on the subject. So with that caveat, we might start with Venus. No star amongst the countless myriads that twinkle over the sidereal fields of the night sky shines so dazzlingly as the planet Venus. Venus is the queen among our planets, the crown jewel of our solar system. She is the inspirer of the poet, the guardian and companion of the lonely shepherd, the lonely morning and evening star. Then it is said that stars teach as well as shine, although their secrets are still untold and unrevealed to the majority of men. They are beautiful and a mystery to verify. However, where there is a mystery, it is generally supposed that there must be also evil, says Byron, that evil is disposed basically because human fancy can even take those bright, luminous eyes peeping at our world through the veil of ether and twist and invert. And thus, during the Middle Ages, the Roman Church and others slandered the bright orb, for it was suggested for them to the best means to reach power. So Venus is such a powerful light and powerful illumination that it also, as we know, can attract the dark side or the shadow. Because for all, it's really the best means to reach power. And these ideas came out of the History of a Planet from Lucifer, 1887, written by H.P.B. So Venus is very controversial, but very illuminating, luminous, and powerful. Now, Lucretius began an amazing poem. He was a Roman noble, and he wrote something called De Rerum Natura, which was 7,000 lines on the nature of things. And it was a treatise, and one of the interesting things, while it is not theosophical per se, it does stress that the universe is ruled by natural laws. And he began his treatise, this ancient Roman epic, by an invocation to Venus. For Venus is the symbol of the creative energy of nature. And he began his poem, since every living form through thee has birth, that breathes and grows and gazes on the sun. All hearts with fond desire thou, race after race, to propagate their kind. And since all nature owns they single sway, nor save through thee can aught be born or blessed, with light divine, aught fair and lovely grow. Thy favor would win, ere I essay life's natural laws in stately song to trace. So, among other things that is sort of implied here is that they're primordial substances which by nature's laws, wherefrom by nature's laws, each life upsprings and thereupon returns dissolved into dust. But Lucretius talks about the seeds of things, or first bodies, since they gave birth to all. And for him, that points to Venus, the source, the symbol of creative energy emerging in nature. And this points to an eternal archetype, one of them, and theosophically, it might be seen as something like divine love, the storehouse of Mahat. Eternal archetypes are held in Mahat, the storage of a cosmic grand design of evolution. Mahat is like the third logos, the universal mind or cosmic ideation, which is the vast storehouse of divine intelligence that provides a structural plan of creation. Now, we shouldn't take this too concretely, the words, but nonetheless, there is that point, if not plan, of creation. And while Mahat might provide the architecture, it is divine love that is the expression of spiritual vibrations, which advances sparks of consciousness. So we have the notion of Mahat as the storage in these primordial seeds, and out of this bloom like the lotus, seeds that express divine love. And this divine love is a cohesive power, acting as fohat, or love, acting in motion that binds together, a motion of harmony, a grading of energy of Mahat into manifestation, ensuring that the universe is inherently compassionate, orderly, and driven by the ultimate unity of all things. And thus, bringing the unmanifest universe into objective existence. It combines thus the head, which is Mahat, the architecture, the mind, with the heart, which is divine love, which is that cohesive, compassionate force. In doing so, then, it says something about another archetype of Venus, whose function is to bring the unmanifested universe into objective existence. This archetype can be seen, another archetype can be seen in terms of the idea then of Aphrodite, Venus Aphrodite. Now, in the Greek, Aphrodite means love, beauty, and passion. And Zeus was her, Aphrodite's father, Leto her mother, and Apollo her brother. And in some myths, she and her brother worked seamlessly, both embodying creative generation, holding the idea of the male and female generative processes as one. And Venus, which was actually a Roman name, not a Greek name, and came later, added the power of that to the word, that generation. Helen Valberg writes, this symbol of the creative energy of nature has been described as Venus Aphrodite, linked to the Hindu Lakshmi, the lotus floating at creation during the churning of the sea of milk. From these waves flow the emanation of the objective out of the subjective. As the mother of Eros, she brings into being the fiery action of divine will and fervent desire to manifest through creation. As the personification of the sea, she signifies the waves of its unfolding lotus petals. He or she is the mother virgin of the great deep, who becomes only at the grossest level the froth of the wave. Now, in another sense, Venus then is the all-female in the universe. She is lunar, symbolizing divine love, her beauty unfolding as a revelation of the creative principle in the macrocosm and the microcosm. Through her aroused will, imagination, and all other powers, the universe evolves. Hers is the germ of divinity, however, because of divine love, too, which rests in the human heart and enables it to illuminate the mind. Working together with Mercury, she bears the light of heaven and returns it laden with sacrificial offerings. So we get another archetype of Venus, which is emanating the objective out of the subjective and bringing the creative principle to life in both the macrocosm and the microcosm through this force of light and returning it with sacrificial offerings. Now, Venus was characterized by Pythagoras as the sole altar, a second sun, on account of her radiance being unequaled by any other. And he was really the first to draw the attention of ancient theogonists, because before it began to be called Venus, it was known in pre-Hesiodic theogony as Isophorus or Phosphoros and Hesperus, the children of the dawn and the twilight. In Hesiod, moreover, the planet decomposed into two beings. These two beings I mentioned, two beings of Isophorus, the Lucifer of the Latins in the morning, and Hesperus, the evening star. They are the children of Asterius and Eos, the starry heaven and dawn, and the luminous morn. And it is said that the luminous morning orb is carried away in his early youth by Aphrodite. That is, Eos Prosperous was carried away in his early youth by Aphrodite, who makes of him the night guardian of her sanctuary. He is the beautiful morning star who, while gradually eclipsing the light of her beloved, seems to carry off the star and makes it reappear on the evening horizon when it watches the gates of heaven in the early morning. And I had as many of you may have had, opportunities to look up in the evening sky as it begins to darken. And the other day saw a beautiful crescent moon, and then the evening star, Venus. It is so amazing. Phosphorus, issuing from the waters of the ocean, raises in heaven his sacred thread to announce the approach of divine light. So when called Lucifer, the light bringer, as HPB called Lucifer, and associated with Venus, has not to do with darkness and everything with light. And the light destroys, in the myth at least, the lethal darkness of night. And under divine love, Venus, the mother of the morning sun, but daughter of the evening sun, which slips away into the mystery of darkness. So Venus obviously gives off this light which destroys the darkness of night and illuminates, and it is identified by Pythagoras as the third of the 7 places of the sun. She's the most radiant planet in the heavens, who receives twice the light from the sun than the earth does, and gives away 1/3 of it to our darker globe. Thus, she is the earth's alter ego, another archetype, the occult sister brother Venus Lucifer. The 7 sons of light, as regents of the planet, have direct astral and psychic communication with the earth and its guides and watchers, morally and physically. But Venus is the earth's immediate spiritual prototype. And when the 2 planets are on the same side of the sun and closest together, Venus always shows the earth the same face. And there are a lot of myths involved, like the Vedic myth about Venus Sukra, where geological changes that affect Venus Sukra also impact the earth simultaneously. And we might have an example of that later on. Now, in the secret doctrine, HPV refers to a progression of cosmological states, beginning with the circle, advancing to the circle with a central point, the circle divided by a horizontal line, and then by a vertical line, forming a cross within the circle. The cross dropping below the circle symbolizes the manifesting logos, macrocosmically and in the microcosm. It signifies the 3rd root race at the point where it is ready to fall. These stages can be identified with the planets. So Helen Valborg writes, Mercury is the domain of the archangels synthesized in the being of Hermes Buddha. And the gods of Venus are thus called principalities, through whose combined essence the objective emanates out of the subjective, and divine ideation passes into visible form. And this emanation is depicted by the springing forth of Venus Lakshmi, who opens the understanding of the creative logoi. As they see archetypal forms, they must copy and build upon. So Venus, in relationship to evolution has a major role all through the different rounds, but particularly on and to its way from Earth, the human monad, which is born in boundless light symbolized by the sun, passes through 7 planetary regions, including Venus. The rules of each give the substance, endowing the monads with a spark of light. So Venus has a couple of functions in this regard. One, as a downward triangle, Venus can be seen with Mercury and Mars, illuminating all the creative energy of nature, the higher and the lower, in sort of a downward triangle. But as an upward triangle, Venus and Mercury form 2 upper points of this triangle, representing a trinity of mother and son, completed by the sun as father. Thus, Venus, in relation to the sun and in relation to both its downward and upward relations, has a mysterious relationship to the sun, like a Shakti, which embraces all masculine and feminine characteristics assigned to it. She falls in the descending triangle, but she also rises out of the wave, out of the darkness of pre-dawn. Now, the Vedas tell us that Venus Shukra was a preceptor of the Daita, the giants of the 4th race, which once ruled the world and whom the Greeks called Titans. One myth suggests that Shukra adopted the earth because he had no satellites on his own, but the earth gave his parent, Venus, however, much trouble in return. The regent of Shukra, loving his adopted child, incarnated as Ushanas and gave the earth perfect laws. But these were disregarded and rejected in later ages, bringing about the loss among humans of their conscious connection with their spiritual connection and mentor. And this was paralleled by certain dramatic changes affecting the planet Venus itself, symbolized by great trials undergone by Shukra when he strove to protect the Daityas from the fighting gods. His great tapas, where he hung his head downward and had to, for 50 years, imbibe the smoke of chaff, is a striking penance of symbolizing the great declination of the axis of Venus, amounting to 50 degrees, and to its envelopment into eternal clouds. This can be seen as a tapas born of the evaporation of water on the planet on the physical plane, since we think it's now replaced by sulfuric acid. Yet refining the light projected downward and refining the presence of the sacrifice of the presence of Venetians on behalf of the earth by giving a more refined light reflection to the earth. So it really is a sacrifice. And this was sort of amazing to me, and I don't really understand this very much, but as I mentioned, people believe that the water on Venus has been reduced substantially, replaced by sulfur. And so what might that mean? Well, sulfur in alchemy is associated with spirit, quicksilver or mercury. As spirit, sulfur is the masculine fiery principle with dryness, hardness, and rigidity, and theoretical knowledge. Also, sulfur fixes the volatile Mercury, represented by the planet Mercury, but requires the interplay of 2 generative forces. And so sulfur and quicksilver acting upon each other were believed to be the volatile spirit, and that sulfur relates to quicksilver as the male to the female to form the first principles of metals. Again, we're going from the subjective to the objective form here, right? And sulfur has not fully done its work of purifying and refining, so they combine with other metals and are acted upon it. And so this sulfur is a refining catalyst, as in the formation of ether from alcohol. So the role played by sulfur and sulfuric acid, whereby metals are dissolved and formed into a series of reactions, correspond to the way in which consciousness is broken up, dies, and is reborn. So it's just a remarkable chemical conversion that takes place in the history of Venus and creates its vesture of sulfuric acid clouds, which can be seen as a residue effect of a process of a more ethereal plane. And in this way, by giving up water, there is a real sacrifice in order to refine the light that comes to Earth. So occultism then teaches that the visible planets are merely representations on our physical plane of actually our own septenary globe chains. So the Dhyanis, and we're using Dhyani in a general way, and as a general term, or regions of the planets, overbrood each of the 7 races of our planet. And in doing so, we know that we ourselves were told in the voice of the silence we're not just a physical body, but a ray from an eternal source of light. And there is that phrase, fix thy gaze upon the star whose ray thou art. So we have a ray from an eternal source of light. And what we're told is that Venus, especially morning Venus, represents that higher self, that illuminating self. And that higher self is reflected with shades of blue. And indigo, which is the color of Venus, is a bridge color that stabilizes blue with a transcendent energy of violet, the color of the midnight sky. So indigo is what we awaken ourselves with. And we try to subdue the lower vestures contained within the lower forces of Aphrodite, the passions, the lower loves or lesser loves, adding up to a higher love with their convoluted patterns of froth and passion. And we can bring into action the force of Venus and tap into the Kirishaktic potential within. It is said that Venus combines the Phohatic and Shaktic power from above and blends together the head and the heart, filling the vestures with joy and wonder. When purification is complete, one is fit to look upon the face of true universal beauty, as Helen Balberg writes. Until human beings gaze upon Venus and feel her beauty burdening in the vast indigo sea of which she reigns, they feel her presence in the early pre-dawn, throbbing to electric currents, igniting their minds and awakening their souls, and they worship with the bright promise of a dark, mysterious sky. And she ends her article, in a vast indigo sea, you rise, pulsating, sending shafts of luminosity, inflaming the heart, igniting the mind. Now, Kirk was able to read Henry David Thoreau's magnificent piece on the potential of the influence of the morning star. And we all know that when we wake up, we're really waking up from different other states of consciousness. And that beginning with sleep, there is that phase of Sushupti, which is deep sleep. which is beyond form. And then when we wake up, we're waking up from subjective states of consciousness into the first so-called objective state of consciousness. And this is the point where we can be very conscious of working with Venus and the forces, the psychic and spiritual forces of that planet, because that's when our minds can be, if we're not too groggy, most illuminating. And we've heard, of course, that if one wakes at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and begins to develop a pattern and a rhythm, undertakes meditation, then one could really have a major effect on one's clarity and purity and direction of consciousness. And in doing so, there's a real joy in the twinkling of illumination. There's a higher joy and an expansiveness and creativity, which, if it's focused on, as we know, our higher principles of Atma Buddhi Manas or the indigo ray, that could uplift us, but not just us, but each and all. So that ends my little discursive pictures of some of the archetypes of Venus. And I don't claim to be any expert, but we're certainly open to questions and a lot of comments, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice. Certainly pointed to many mysteries, gave us a lot of food for thought. So see 2 hands popping up already. Was that Nancy Glasser first?
Yeah. I want to apologize. By accident, I was looking for my Venus pictures in real time, and I sent these other pictures in the chat, so I'm so sorry. I've done stupid things before that might have been really stupid. But anyway, I love the talk, and I love everything that has to do with Venus. Thank you. That's all I was going to say.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that on the chat.
That's all right. We've all made similar
Oh, my God.
blunders. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Podium. Jonathan? Can't hear you if you're speaking. Still not hearing.
You say okay.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Thank you. That was a wonderful impressionistic painting that you did of the archetypes of Venus. So thank you, Maurice, so much. Now, speaking of that, one of the archetypes you mentioned was the idea of manifesting from the unmanifest into manifestation. And then you ended with the idea about coming out of Sushupti, which kind of is the relative unmanifest, and then awakening into the dawn. And it was so beautiful, the reading about the morning being the best season of the day. I thought that was lovely. But so in other words, there's this pristine awakening of coming out of Sushupti and into the dawn and being wide awake at that time. I was wondering if you could connect these two. Well, one's an archetype that you said, and the other is something that is a potential that we're all capable of.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Well, Venus is the morning star, and when it arises, there's a certain kind of relationship to the earth, which provides, let's call it potential, and that potential can be realized if through conscious and repetitive and regular attention and meditation. Meditation on the wonderful qualities of Venus and the wonderful purities, even though we may wake up with some impurities. That by focusing on the purities, but also the divine love, that, and then it becomes our task, it seems, to work with that indigo ray, if you will, through meditation, through concentration, through where we put our attention on higher principles, to begin to really, you might say, enact our higher self, in our higher self, to realize our higher self. And in doing that, it really can set the tonality for the whole day, as Henry David Thoreau spoke about, and we heard that we can become, literally children of the morning. And so, and of course, this can happen before too much noise and too much other distractions hit us. So that's all I can say about it, but others have a comment? Maybe Robert?
I actually have a question, not a comment.
Okay. Does anyone have a comment on the Jonathan's question about how we can come out of sleep and make the morning our day, or a new day, a new incarnation?
Isn't a regular like Buddhist ritual to wake up right before dawn and do the chanting and like the blessings of the world, like the Namamyoho Renge Kyo is it's supposed to be like emphasized like everyone around the world who is follows like the Zen Buddhism usually like wakes up around the same time and does it together, even if you don't see the other person. You're all kind of wishing well that everyone awaken, out of the mud comes the lotus, which is a really beautiful sentiment. I've been waking up early also, and I'm wondering if that's part of it.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Oh, I think I've been doing sun salutations and these mantras, and I've been automatically waking up very early. Like I've done Vipassana and the Rockaways once, so this is something we had to do. And I've also done the one in upstate New York, Peace Pagoda. That was also something we're supposed to do. But I don't know if it's studying theosophy for 2 years now, but now I automatically wake up very early. And I wonder, is this just part of it?
Mm-hmm. If folks could use their virtual hands to, if they want to contribute, because we have over 30 people here present, so that we're not talking over one another, if we could try and be orderly in that way. But thank you, B, for that contribution. I think those were really very relevant points. And I would just add a couple more that Helen in her article, for example, she talks about, of course, the association of geometric symbols with the root races, but also that Venus represents this, as Maurice mentioned a number of times, this kind of emergence out of non-manifestation into manifestation. And she associates that with the circle, the point in the circle, the horizontal line in the circle, and then the cross in the circle, which is if you consult the secret doctrine, you'll find that these are indeed not, they have both associations with the root races in our round, but also with the unfoldment of the cosmos from non-being into being, geometry being one of those great languages that from the very earliest days of humanity, even prior to the awakening of Manas, was used to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. So, and along those lines, the circle you could think of perhaps in one of its meanings and associations as that which is awake even during non-manifestation. And we're also told that the very highest beings associated with the third root race, that is those great instructors and predecessors who then also are servants of humanity in awakening the faculty of manas itself, latent in the evolving human form, and then who also instruct the earliest civilizations and incarnate again and again sacrificially to instruct humanity. That seeing ourselves as also as rays of that same Dhyani Buddhic hierarchy, who have descended into, the shadowy realms of samsara in order to aid and serve all sentient beings, and eventually to develop the capacity to raise all the dimensions and the kingdoms of nature self-consciously up to a higher level at the on the upward arc of evolution. That thinking of oneself as, in fact, being part of that hierarchy, and who's with this great mission, this great duty, to bring this kind of creative fervor of love and compassion and wisdom to each day, and to greet the morning with an appreciation of being that divine ray, which is capable of bridging heaven and earth, right? Of the spiritual with the material, the eternal with the time bound. Just the grateful appreciation and adoration of that hierarchy and of those beings who have assisted humanity, and in the small part that we might be able to play on any given day in our seemingly limited rounds of dharma and duties and relationships. So anyway, just a few thoughts to kind of go along with that. If there's no one else to comment on this question, we could go to your question, Robert.
My question has to do with the symbolism. Has a lot to do with the first archetype, where Venus has to do with the bringing to birth out of the subjective, the objective, which light is a symbol of the objectification or the logos. So you think about Venus is it precedes the sun, and then it follows the sun. So it's curious that it's always associated with the sun, but it comes before the light and then comes after it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also associated with indigo, which, it comes to birth out of the indigo night sky and then goes into the indigo night sky as well. And so, and also then there was mention of the electric currents that are pervasive in space, particularly associated with Venus. So I'm just trying to think of that Venus, is Venus our sort of our key to the depths of our subjectivity? I mean, actually, physically, we have a better chance of our contacting deeper subjectivity by meditating or thinking about Venus before dawn and after sunset.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about that, Maurice, or anyone else in the group?
Well, my only thought is that I think Venus contains the seeds. And so, including the seeds in the language portrayed here, the seeds of subjectivity. But then it also has the energy, the expansiveness, love, the impulse for creation. So it's taking those deep seeds of subjectivity and expanding them, opening them maybe, selectively maybe, but of evocation. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we were thinking about that same point, Robert, that you just made in relation to the last question, because we're wondering, for example, if Mercury is associated with the principle of buddhi, and Venus, at least in one of its associations, would be that of higher manas. And it's also its capacity to descend, its creative capacity and sacrificial and loving capacity to make that descent through the incarnating ray of manas. And that the aspect of the sun that the two are associated with would be the hidden sun rather than the visible sun. The visible sun, we often are directed to think of it as in terms of prana, the pranic force that pervades the solar system. But the hidden sun is something quite different and points to that which transcends any manifestation and what we would associate with the Atman in terms of human principles. And so it's so beautiful to think that the sun, Mercury, and Venus, the two planets closest to the sun, all have this association with the higher triad in humanity, and that the fact that Venus both precedes and follows the manifestation of the physical sun would again points to this, at least in my mind, points to this idea of that higher monastic capacity which remains awake even during the night of non-manifestation, and does so in order to preserve the knowledge gained from one period and bring it to bear in through the manifestation, through the logoic manifestation of the next period. And that's, we're told, is associated with that idea of the Manu and also the fish avatar of Vishnu, but that it's this capacity to remain awake is also apparently critical to being able to preserve that that knowledge, that essence, that nectar of wisdom from an infinite series of manifestations, and to have it be the seed of the following manifestation in its series. So anyway, that's just one way perhaps to begin thinking about it, sort of like the bookends, and also like the seed and the root, Manu, right? Kind of performing that same function. Anyway, that's I see another hand here, Judy.
Yes, hey, hello. I'm unable to start my video, so I guess you don't want to see me. But at any rate, I wonder what it means that we get 10% of our light from Venus, according to the secret doctrine. And according to the secret doctrine, Venus is in its 7th round. So we're not really seeing any planet in the solar system other than what is in our 4th round. We're just seeing this hot ball of fire at the moment, and it isn't fully what Venus is. So does this mean the beings on Venus care for us, or that it's about to become a sun of its own right and rotate out to become a star? What does it mean?
Great question. We're just recalling in Helen's article, she mentioned some of these features of Venus, and actually there's a great video online on YouTube by a group called Astrum, ASTRUM, and they've got a series now on each of the planets that is incorporating all the latest data collected by probes sent to the planets and by NASA, and beautiful illustrations and very detailed explanations of what science currently knows and thinks about these planets. And there have been, as you know, probably a number of these probes that were sent to Venus now, two in particular, and one in the early 90s. That was actually, I believe, it was returning from a much longer journey, but stopped at Venus and did several rotations around the planet using radio technology to penetrate the cloud layers, and was able to map close to 90% of the surface of Venus using that technology. And they showed on this video, it's just incredible. And all the volcanic activity there, and the remarkable features that they don't understand about the surface of that planet. But so, you know, and one of the things that they say when they conclude that video, which we just looked at yesterday, and there's so much there, including about all these layers of clouds that are moving very, very rapidly, and have misguided scientists in the past, thinking that represented the rotation of the planet, which it doesn't. That the actual rotation is much, much slower than the Earth's, and something like once every 170 days you get a single rotation of the planet surface. The equator moving at something like 6 kilometers per hour. But what I wanted to mention was that, you know, these remarkable statements that Helen brings out in her article, and that are also mentioned by HPB, right? One of the things that is mentioned in the Secret Doctrine in the italic commentaries is that Venus is in its 7th round, whereas the Earth is in its 4th, right? So, and we also have this idea of Plato, for example, being a 5th rounder, the Buddha being a 6th rounder. So what would, and we're told in the SD also that the 7th round for the Earth means that humanity will be emerging as a Dion Chahonic host, and will be composed entirely of adepts and Buddhas. But what will the physical planet look like at that time? We don't really know. It's going to be enormously different than what it is right now. And beings visiting the Earth in our 7th round, they might see something like Venus, although there's no inhabitants. This is completely inhabitable planet, when in actuality, beings on other planes are fully working in harmony with the deepest spiritual truths of nature. So I think and this is something that gets brought out in many of her articles, and also in the SD again and again, that we should not think that because a particular planet looks completely inhabitable by our standards, that does not mean that there's no beings, that there's no humanity there in evolution. That the conditions that apply on that planet and the way life may have evolved may be far prior to our current state of evolution, or far beyond it. And even if it was at the same level, it wouldn't necessarily look anything like our humanity looks. So we have to be very careful about that, not to apply, our standards to what we are capable of viewing in regards to other planets.
Okay.
Yes, is that Jonathan or no?
No, it's me. I just moved to another computer in the room here.
Am I muted? Yeah. Okay. Kirk, I was fascinated.
Wait, turn this computer off.
And can you hear me okay?
We're getting a little double echo kind of thing.
Oh, no, I just turned this one off.
Let me turn this one off. Good.
How does this sound? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks.
'Cause anyway, just the technology in this room. So Kirk, I thank you for that, and thank you for this wonderful presentation, Maurice, on all these different concepts from Helen Valborg, who is always challenging to understand. But I wanted to go back to this thing you were just talking about, and Judy mentioned it, and I was kind of curious about that, Venus being in the 7th round, and then us in the 4th round on the Earth chain. One naive question from my standpoint as a student is, for the monastic evolutionary obligatory pilgrimage, is it part of the ideas from secret doctrine and HPB that humanity, or us as monastic entities, will go from one planetary chain to another planetary chain in our evolution? Or will we always stay on the Earth chain?
Well, no, that's part of the teaching that we get in the first volume, that we're actually, all the beings who are currently engaged in evolution on the Earth chain were previously engaged on the Moon chain.
Yes.
But just an interesting tidbit that also, I think it's mentioned in the article, but in HPB's discussion of the planets, she says that one of the reasons that Venus doesn't have any satellites is because it is in an advanced round. And that when the Earth is in an advanced round, it won't have any, the Moon will be gone. Because that also represents the Kamarupa of our planet in one of its aspects, right? It's associated with that Kamarupic entity, which, as we know, in after-death states for a human being, it takes time for the Kamarupa to dissipate entirely, right, and return to the principles of nature. So that's a very interesting association, but that it's also complex, and we wouldn't want to be rigid about it. So, but what seems to be clear is that you have this host of monads in various stages of evolution who all are engaged in a particular planetary evolution that itself has an infinite series that goes back. So prior to the Moon chain, we were on some other planet, some other planetary cycle, and prior in an endless series. Mm-hmm. And so, and there is a kind of, it appears we could call a coherence, because it has a karmic history, but at the same time, it's also intimately associated with the other planets of our solar system, that the forces and capacities of human nature and of all the kingdoms of nature are being transmitted by what we call maybe intergalactic spiritual forces that are then being transmitted like through lenses by the other planets of our solar system, and then taking place and unfolding on the Earth. So that there's like this, any way that you look at it is going to be limited and obscure the interconnections, the infinite series of interconnections that it has with other dimensions and other planetary systems, in both in our solar cosmos and in other cosmos, because that's the other, that's the fabulous teaching also that we get in the secret doctrine, that what we're attempting to study and to comprehend is these archetypal laws that apply throughout the cosmos, no matter how distant, that the same sort of evolution, this involution and evolution, descend into human, we call the human stage of evolution, although it can take an infinite variety of forms, and then through self-conscious awakening, this upward arc, that is going on throughout the cosmos and in the cosmos as a whole, so that every logoic center, every planetary system, every sun, every galaxy is undergoing that same evolutionary process at different stages and in different ways and with its own karmic history. So, it gets very complex, but interrelated. So this is what I'm recalling. I had a conversation with another student this afternoon that ties into this whole idea of what's called Indra's net, right? Is that every bead, it's this vast interconnected web, right? In which there's at each intersection of the web, there's a little sparkling bead that represents, you could say, a human being, a planetary system, a being of any dimension. It could be a snowflake. But within that entity, the entire web is reflected. It's so that it has like this mirror-like surface. The entire web is reflected in no matter how small the part, and that's that whole idea of microcosm and macrocosm. Anyway, I don't want to go on too long, and I have already. So
yeah, thank you. No, that helps. That helps a lot. And the other associated question is that Venus has adopted Earth as a sister, and so we have these different planetary rounds. And this is really helping me because tomorrow morning we're going to be talking on our Sunday group about the globes and the rounds and the planetary change. So thank you.
okay,
We got about 5 more minutes. Or more.
Thomas Daffner.
Yes, hello. Fascinating. I've been listening to you all. I'm dialing in from France. It's kind of nearly 3 a.m. here. Just 2 points, really. About the archetypal significance of Venus, I think there's something we've overlooked. I came in late to the conversation, but maybe you mentioned it before. But science says that Venus used to have, for 2 billion years, an enormous amount of water. It might have had life even. It was a flowing, happy, water-filled world. And then it had runaway climate change, and the water's all gone. So really, we're looking at the potential future of our planet if we're not very careful. I think that's something that we, esotericists of all kinds should sort of flag up when we look at Venus. Not sort of over-romanticize it. It's bloody hot. And it's a disastrous future for humanity if we go down that road. So that's the first point I want to make. I don't know if you mentioned that before or not. The second point is that I've just completed a huge mammoth job of doing reform of the Gregorian calendar, which you will know the days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have 7 days a week, do not include any planets discovered since 1584, when the Gregorian calendar was fixed. My reform, which is a scientific proposal, brings in an 11-day week with the 4 planets we already have, Moon, and the rest of them, Venus as well, Saturn, Mars, etc. But also brings in Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, and Earth, Terra. So if you have these 8 planets plus a 3-day weekend, you get 11-day week. And Venus is a day of no work. I'm suggesting we have a weekend from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, recurring every 4th day, every 5th day. So you have 4 days of work, you have a 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And then it recurs. Anyway, I think it's a brilliant thing. I'm happy to send a copy to anyone that looks me up. But my question about Friday, Venus is Friday, Freya in the Norse calendar, is sacred to Islam. Now, Herodotus said that the Arabs used to worship Aphrodite Urania. That's a very interesting thing. The name Venus in Greek is Aphrodite. They don't talk about Venus, they talk about Aphrodite. And the heavenly Aphrodite is what Plato said is the goal of all philosophy. So Aphrodite Urania is actually, Allah. What they're worshipping in their mosques all over the planet is actually Aphrodite Urania. I've done a commentary on the Quran trying to sort of explain the archetypal significance of all this in detail. I'm a scholar of comparative religion for a day job. And I'm just very mindful. I think you're from San Diego, and there was a shooting in the mosque recently in San Diego that was tragic and showing the complete ignorance of people about Islam what it really stands for. If people realize, hey, they're just worshipping Aphrodite Urania, I think we could get on and make that a peace day. So anyway, my calendar is called the Universal Planetary Peace Calendar. Makes Friday, Saturday, Sunday a recurring 3-day weekend.
Mhm.
And I think it holds the key to interfaith peacemaking.
Was there a question there?
Well, the question, yeah, I mean, did you mention the thing about the loss of water on Venus and how we're looking at runaway climate change?
No.
Oh, yeah.
And also, have you thought about its role in the calendar as a potential peacemaker?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Maurice, do you want to comment on?
Yes, and this was going to be my comment. I did earlier in the presentation mention that Venus used to have a lot of water and now it's full of sulfuric acid. So the question is, of what significance is this? And the one thing we may have lost in the conversation here in that respect, and I may not be able to explain it as well as others could, is that there's a refinement between higher and lower energies. That Venus is creative energy and creative divine energy. But it's a question then of how we sift through it and continue to look through the light. But when we look to the light of Venus, we also have to sift and sacrifice and burn out and purify our lower natures. And that's really a part to me of the significance of understanding Venus and its particular closeness to the Earth. I know we're running out of time, so I'll let David make his comment.
Thank you, Maurice. Go ahead, David.
Oh, I thought I'd let HPB speak here for a moment. This is from Isis Unveiled, 259. She says, astrology is to exact astronomy what psychology is to exact physiology. In astrology and psychology, one has to step beyond the visible world of matter and enter into the domain of transcendent spirit. So I just wanted to. Thanks.
Yeah. That also reminds me that astrologically, right now, Venus, Jupiter, and Uranus are all in Gemini. Gemini being kind of this revolutionary sign, which Valberg characterizes as being the realignment of the inverted mind. So we have something to look forward to, I hope. So thank you all so much, Maurice especially. Wonderful presentation and many very pertinent and wonderful questions. And just thank everyone who contributed and listened in today, whether you contributed or not. Have a wonderful rest of the weekend, and we look forward. Hope you all can join in again next Saturday.